The arrow had been meant for his heart, but Gideon Shaw moved at the last second, and the iron tip buried itself in her shoulder instead. Kerra had never missed a shot before. Not in 12 years of hunting, not in 7 campaigns with the Blood Fang clan, and certainly not in the 3 assassinations she had already completed for the Shadow Council. But this human healer, this soft-spoken man who lived alone in a cottage at the edge of the Whispering Wood, had bent down to gather herbs at the precise moment she released her bowstring, and now her own poisoned arrow jutted from her flesh while he stared at her with wide, startled eyes the color of river stone. She tried to run. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she crashed into the underbrush, her vision already swimming from the venom she had coated the arrowhead with that very morning. Blackroot extract, fast-acting and fatal within an hour. She had chosen it specifically because there was no antidote, no hope of survival once it entered the bloodstream. The irony was not lost on her as darkness crept into the edges of her sight. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. She thrashed weakly, reaching for the knife at her belt, but her fingers would not obey her commands. The human's face appeared above her, concern etched into his features, and she wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. She had come to kill him, and here he was, cradling her as gently as if she were something precious instead of the monster his kind had always claimed her to be. "Easy," he said, his voice calm despite the tremor she could hear beneath it. "Easy now. I have got you." She tried to tell him to let her die, that she deserved nothing less, but her tongue felt thick and useless in her mouth. The poison was working faster than it should have, probably because her heart was racing, pumping the venom through her system with brutal efficiency. She could feel it burning in her veins like liquid fire, could taste the bitter tang of it at the back of her throat. Gideon carried her. She was dimly aware of movement, of being lifted as if she weighed nothing, though she stood nearly 6 feet tall, and her muscular frame had intimidated warriors twice his size. But this human healer was stronger than he looked, and he moved with purpose through the forest, his breathing steady even as he navigated the uneven ground. The cottage appeared through her fading vision, a small structure of weathered wood and stone that sat in a clearing surrounded by carefully tended gardens. He kicked the door open and brought her inside, laying her on a sturdy wooden table that had clearly been used for this purpose before. The surface was worn smooth and scrubbed clean, and dried herbs hung from the rafters above, filling the air with scents she could not name in her current state. "This is going to hurt," he told her, and then he broke the arrow shaft. She screamed, the sound ripping from her throat before she could stop it, and her back arched off the table. His hand pressed firmly against her sternum, holding her down with surprising strength. "I am sorry," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "I am so sorry, but I need to get this out before I can help you." He pulled the arrowhead free in one smooth motion, and she screamed again, her vision going white with pain. But his hands were already moving, pressing cloth against the wound, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. She could hear him muttering to himself, a constant stream of words that might have been prayer or simply the habit of a man who lived alone and talked to fill the silence. "Blackroot venom," he said, examining the arrowhead. "Of course it is blackroot. You came prepared, did you not? Whoever sent you gave you the best poison they could find." She managed to focus on his face. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30 summers at most, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. There was a scar on his left cheek, thin and pale, and his hands were marked with the small cuts and burns of someone who worked with plants and fire regularly. He was handsome in the way humans measured such things, she supposed, though that hardly mattered now. "Let me die," she rasped, finally finding her voice. "It is what I deserve." "Probably," he agreed, which startled her. "But I am not in the business of deciding who deserves to die and who does not. I am a healer. I heal. That is all I do." He moved with practiced efficiency, gathering jars and bottles from shelves that lined the walls, measuring and mixing ingredients she could not see clearly. Her vision kept blurring, the poison pulling her under, but each time she started to slip away, pain would lance through her shoulder and drag her back to consciousness. "Stay with me," Gideon commanded, and there was steel in his voice now, an authority that seemed at odds with his gentle demeanor. "You do not get to take the easy way out. If you came here to kill me, then you owe me the courtesy of surviving long enough to tell me why." He poured something down her throat, a bitter liquid that made her gag and cough, but he held her jaw firmly until she swallowed it all. Then he packed her wound with a paste that burned worse than the poison, and she would have fought him if she had the strength. Instead, she could only lie there and endure it, tears streaming from her eyes, her hands clenched into fists so tight her claws drew blood from her palms. Time lost meaning. She drifted in and out of awareness, sometimes opening her eyes to find him still working, changing her bandages, forcing more medicine down her throat, keeping the fire stoked to ward off the chill that racked her body despite the summer warmth. Other times she dreamed, fevered visions of her clan and the assignment she had accepted with such confidence, the promise of gold and status if she eliminated the human healer who had been helping orc refugees escape across the border. When she finally woke with a clear head, dawn light was filtering through the cottage windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Gideon sat in a chair beside the table, his head tilted back against the wall, his eyes closed. He looked exhausted, dark circles bruising the skin beneath his eyes, his shoulders slumped with weariness. He had stayed awake all night, she realized, stayed awake to keep her alive. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain flared through her shoulder. The movement must have made some sound because his eyes snapped open instantly, and he was on his feet before she could blink. "Lie still," he ordered, his hands gentle but firm as he eased her back down. "The wound is still fresh, and I do not want you tearing the stitches." "You stitched me," she said stupidly, still trying to make sense of what had happened. "Of course I stitched you. What did you think I would do, let you bleed out on my table?" He shook his head, moving to a basin to wet a cloth. "You are not the first person to come through that door with an injury, and you will not be the last. Though you are the first to have been injured by their own weapon while trying to kill me, so I suppose that is notable." He wrung out the cloth and returned to her side, dabbing gently at her forehead. The cool water felt wonderful against her overheated skin, and she found herself closing her eyes and leaning into his touch before she remembered that she should not trust this, should not trust him. "Why?" she asked, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "Why save me?" Gideon was quiet for a long moment, his hand stilling against her brow. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "Because every life has value, even the life of someone who came here to end mine. Because I have seen too much death and too much suffering, and I refuse to add to it if I have any choice. Because you are young, and you deserve a chance to be more than whatever they made you into." "You do not know what I am," she said bitterly. "What I have done. You are right, I do not." He resumed his gentle ministrations, wiping away the sweat and grime from her face. "But I know what you are not. You are not dead, and as long as you are alive, you have the opportunity to choose a different path." She wanted to argue with him, to tell him that he was naive and foolish, and that his kindness would get him killed. But exhaustion was pulling at her again, the medicine he had given her dragging her down into sleep, and his hand was so gentle. and she could not remember the last time anyone had touched her with such care. When she woke again, it was afternoon, and the cottage smelled of bread and herbs. Gideon was moving around the small kitchen area, his back to her as he worked. She watched him for a while, noting the way he moved with quiet efficiency, the way he hummed softly to himself as he sliced vegetables and stirred something in an iron pot over the fire. "You are awake," he said without turning around. "Good, you need to eat." "How did you know?" she asked. "Your breathing changed." He glanced over his shoulder, offering her a small smile. "I have spent enough time around the sick and injured to recognize the difference between sleep and wakefulness." He brought her a bowl of soup, something simple with chicken and root vegetables, and helped her sit up enough to eat without choking. Her shoulder protested every movement, but the wound felt different now, the burning poison replaced by the clean ache of healing flesh. "What is your name?" he asked as she ate. She hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "Kerra." "Kerra," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "I am Gideon Shaw, but I suppose you already knew that. You would have had to know who I was to try to kill me." "Yes. Are you going to try again when you are healed?" The question was asked so casually, as if he were asking about the weather, and she nearly choked on her soup. "What? Are you going to try to kill me again?" He met her eyes, his expression calm and open. "I would like to know what to expect." She stared at him, trying to find some hint of fear or accusation in his face, but there was only genuine curiosity. "I do not know," she admitted finally. "I should. That is what I was paid to do. But you do not want to." "I did not say that. You did not have to." He took the empty bowl from her hands and set it aside. "If you truly wanted me dead, you would have tried something by now, even injured as you are, but you have not. You have just been watching me and trying to understand why I saved you." He was right, and she hated that he was right. "The Shadow Council does not accept failure," she said quietly. "If I do not complete my assignment, they will send someone else, someone better prepared, someone who will not miss. Then I suppose I had better make sure you are well enough to leave before that happens," Gideon said. "It would be terribly inconvenient to survive one assassination attempt only to die to the second." His tone was light, almost joking, but she could see the tension in the set of his shoulders. He was afraid, she realized. Of course he was afraid. She had tried to kill him, and now he knew that more attempts would come. But he was still helping her, still tending her wounds and feeding her soup as if she were a guest instead of an enemy. "You could turn me in," she pointed out. "The nearest human settlement would pay well for a captured orc assassin. They might even offer you protection." "I could," he agreed. "But I will not. The humans in Millbrook hate orcs even more than most, and they would torture you for information before they killed you. I will not be responsible for that. You are a fool." "So I have been told." He returned to his cooking, stirring the pot with long, practiced motions. "But I am a living fool, which is more than I can say for many people who consider themselves wise." Over the following days, Kerra began to understand why the Shadow Council wanted this man dead. Gideon Shaw was not just a healer, he was a haven. Orcs came to his door in the dead of night, refugees fleeing persecution and violence, and he took them in without question. He fed them, treated their wounds, and helped them travel safely across the border into the territories where orc clans lived in relative peace, away from human settlements. She watched from the table, still too weak to move much, as he welcomed a mother and her 2 children who had been beaten by a mob in a nearby village. The woman's face was swollen and bruised, one eye completely shut, and the children clung to her legs with wide, terrified eyes. Gideon treated them with the same gentle care he had shown Kerra, cleaning their wounds, speaking softly to calm their fears, preparing beds for them in the small loft above the main room. "You are going to get yourself killed," Kerra told him when the family had finally settled to sleep. "Probably," he said again, that same word he had used when she told him to let her die. "But someone has to help them. If not me, then who? Why does it have to be anyone? They are orcs. Your people hate us." Gideon looked at her for a long moment, his expression sad. "My people are capable of terrible hatred, it is true, but that does not mean I have to share it. I was a soldier once, did you know that? I fought in the border wars, killed my share of orc warriors in battle. I was good at it too. Very good." He turned away, staring into the fire. "But then I was wounded, badly, and left for dead on the battlefield. My own unit retreated without me, assumed I would not survive the night. And do you know who found me? An old orc woman, a healer from a clan whose warriors I had been killing just hours before. She carried me to her tent, treated my wounds, gave me water when I was delirious with fever. She saved my life, and when I asked her why, she said the same thing I told you. Every life has value." Kerra felt something shift in her chest, an uncomfortable sensation that she could not quite name. "What happened to her?" "She died defending her camp when human soldiers raided it a week later. I was still too weak to fight, could barely stand, but I watched as they cut her down. She had saved my life, and I could do nothing to save hers." His hands clenched into fists. "So now I do what I can. I heal whoever comes to my door, orc or human, and I help those who need to escape the hatred and violence. It is not enough, it will never be enough, but it is what I can do." That night, Kerra dreamed of the old orc woman she had never met, the healer who had shown mercy to an enemy and died for it. She woke with tears on her face and found Gideon sitting by the fire, keeping watch as he always did, making sure his charges were safe. By the end of the first week, Kerra could sit up on her own and walk short distances, though her shoulder still ached and her left arm remained weak. Gideon changed her bandages every morning and evening, his touch professional but kind, and she found herself looking forward to these moments more than she wanted to admit. "You are healing well," he told her one evening as he examined the wound. "Another week or two and you should have most of your strength back. The scar will be significant, I am afraid. Blackroot venom damages the tissue in ways that are difficult to fully repair." "I have other scars," she said. "One more will not matter." His fingers traced lightly around the edges of the wound, careful not to cause pain. "How did you end up as an assassin? You cannot be more than 25 summers." 23, she corrected. "And I ended up here the same way most orcs end up doing things that humans consider monstrous. I was good at killing, and people were willing to pay for that skill." "That is not an answer," she sighed, closing her eyes as he began applying fresh bandages. "My mother was killed by human soldiers when I was 12. Raiders came to our settlement, burned it to the ground, took everything we had. I survived because I hid, because I was a coward while my mother died trying to protect our neighbors. After that, I was alone. A clan took me in, trained me to fight, and when I was old enough, I started taking contracts. The Shadow Council noticed my work and recruited me 5 years ago, and you have been killing for them ever since." "Yes." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "I am good at what I do, Gideon. I do not miss. I do not hesitate. I kill whoever they tell me to kill, and I do not lose sleep over it." "Except you did miss," he pointed out gently. "You missed me, and you have not tried to finish the job. That suggests you do lose sleep over it, at least sometimes." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the words would not come. Because he was right, damn him. She had been losing sleep over her assignments for months now, questioning the orders she received, wondering if the people she killed truly deserved to die, or if they were simply inconvenient to someone with power and gold. The mother and her children left after 3 days, heading north with supplies and directions to a safe passage through the mountains. They thanked Gideon with tears in their eyes, and the younger child, a girl of perhaps 6 summers, gave Kerra a small carved wooden bird before they departed. "My father made it," the girl said shyly. "Before the humans killed him. I want you to have it because you look sad and birds make people happy." Kerra held the small carving in her large hands, feeling the careful detail of the wings, the smooth polish of the wood. She could not remember the last time someone had given her a gift, could not remember the last time anyone had looked at her with something other than fear or greed. "Thank you," she managed, her voice rough with emotions she did not know how to process. After they left, the cottage felt emptier than before. Gideon went about his daily tasks, tending his gardens, preparing medicines, organizing his supplies, and Kerra watched him work with growing fascination. He moved through the world with such quiet purpose, finding joy in simple things like the perfect bloom of a healing herb or the way sunlight filtered through the trees. "Why do you live alone?" she asked one afternoon as she sat outside, her face turned toward the warmth of the sun. Gideon looked up from the herbs he was harvesting. "Because most people in the settlements do not appreciate what I do. They tolerate me because I am a skilled healer and they occasionally need my services, but they do not trust me. They especially do not trust me after they learned I help orcs." "You could lie to them, hide what you do." "I could," he agreed, dropping a handful of lavender into his basket, "but I am a terrible liar. My face gives everything away, and besides, I am tired of hiding. This cottage belonged to my grandmother. She was a healer too, taught me everything I know. When she died, she left it to me, and I decided this was where I would make my stand. If people need help, they know where to find me. If they have a problem with who I choose to help, they can stay away." "That is lonely," he smiled, but it was a sad expression. "Yes, it is very lonely. But lonely is better than being surrounded by people who want me to be something I am not." Kerra understood that feeling better than she wanted to admit. She had never fit properly with her clan, had always been too questioning, too independent. The Shadow Council valued her skills but not her opinions, and she knew that the other assassins saw her as a tool rather than a person. Loneliness was familiar territory. "I could make you some tea," Gideon offered, breaking into her thoughts. "There is a blend I make with chamomile and mint that is quite soothing." "I would like that," she said, and realized she meant it. They fell into a routine over the following days. Gideon would wake at dawn and check her wounds, then prepare breakfast for them both. She insisted on helping with small tasks, chopping vegetables for soup or folding clean bandages, needing to feel useful rather than simply an invalid taking up space. He seemed to understand this without her having to explain, accepting her help with quiet gratitude. In the afternoons, they talked. She told him about growing up in an orc settlement, about the traditions and customs of her people that humans never bothered to learn. He told her about his childhood in a small village, about learning medicine from his grandmother, about the horrors he had witnessed during the war, and the moment he decided he would never pick up a sword again. "It was after a battle," he said one day, his voice distant with memory. "We had won, technically, but the cost was staggering. Bodies everywhere, orc and human alike, and I was walking through the carnage trying to find survivors. There was this young orc warrior, could not have been more than 16. He was gutted, dying slowly, and he begged me for water. Not to save him, just water, because he was so thirsty." Gideon's hands tightened on the cup he was holding. "I gave it to him. I sat with him until he died, holding his hand, and I realized that I could not see the monster everyone told me he was supposed to be." I just saw a scared boy who wanted his mother and did not want to die alone. That was the moment I knew I could not keep fighting. I could not keep killing people just because someone in power declared them the enemy. What did your commanders say when you refused to fight? They called me a coward and a traitor. I was dishonorably discharged, which suited me fine. I came here to my grandmother's cottage, and I have been here ever since. He looked at her, his gray eyes serious. I know that refusing to fight does not undo the lives I took. I know that healing a few refugees does not balance the scales, but it is what I can do to make things even slightly better, and I have to believe that matters. It matters, Kerra said softly. You have saved more lives than you know. The refugees you help, they talk about you. They call you the kind heart, and they tell others that there is one human who can be trusted, who will help without expecting anything in return. That gives people hope, Gideon. That matters more than you realize. He looked surprised, almost embarrassed by her words. I did not know they called me that. Well, they do. And the Shadow Council wants you dead because you give orcs hope, because you prove that not all humans are enemies. They want to maintain the hatred and fear because it serves their purposes, and you are a threat to that. So they sent you to eliminate the threat. Yes. Gideon was quiet for a moment. Are you going to tell them you failed? Kerra had been avoiding thinking about that question, but she could not dodge it forever. I do not know, she admitted. If I tell them I failed, they will send someone else. If I lie and say you are dead, they will eventually discover the truth when you continue helping refugees. Either way, you are in danger. And if you complete the assignment, if you kill me after all. She looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the kindness in his eyes, the gentleness of his hands, the way he had saved her life even though she had come to end his. I cannot, she said, the words feeling like both a confession and a vow. I cannot kill you, Gideon. I do not know what that makes me, what it says about the person I have become, but I cannot do it. He reached across the table and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against her skin. It makes you someone who chose mercy over orders. Someone who decided that one life mattered more than gold or status or fear. That is not weakness, Kerra. That is strength. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that choosing not to kill could be as powerful as all the times she had chosen to kill. But she had spent so many years being a weapon that she did not know how to be anything else. That night, as she lay in the loft that Gideon had cleared for her use, she heard sounds from outside. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving carefully through the forest. She was on her feet instantly, ignoring the pain in her shoulder as she grabbed the knife Gideon had returned to her days ago. She crept down the ladder and found Gideon already awake, standing by the window with a concerned expression. Refugees, she whispered. I do not think so. Refugees do not move in formation like that, and these people are trying too hard to be quiet. Kerra's blood ran cold. She knew those patterns, knew that particular style of cautious advance. Shadow Council, she said. They sent a team to check on me or to finish the job if I failed. We need to leave now. But before Gideon could respond, the door burst open, and 3 orc assassins flooded into the cottage, weapons drawn. Kerra recognized the leader, a scarred veteran named Drask who had trained her when she first joined the council. So the rumors are true, Drask said, his yellow eyes moving between Kerra and Gideon. You have been living with the target instead of killing him. I told the council you were getting soft, that you were losing your edge. They should have sent me from the beginning. Drask, wait, Kerra began, but he was not interested in conversation. Step aside, Kerra. This does not have to involve you. We will kill the human and report that you were injured during the assignment but completed it before succumbing to your wounds. You will die a hero of the council. And if I refuse, Drask's expression hardened. Then you will die a traitor instead. Choose quickly." Kerra looked at Gideon, who stood calmly despite the weapons pointed in his direction. He had saved her life, had shown her more kindness than she had known in years, had made her question everything she thought she knew about herself and her purpose. She could not let him die. She would not. "I choose him," she said, stepping between Gideon and the assassins, her knife held ready. Drask shook his head slowly. "You stupid girl. You are throwing away everything for a human. He is using you, cannot you see that? Manipulating you with his gentle words and kind gestures. That is what humans do. They lie and manipulate until you are too confused to see the truth." "The truth." Kerra laughed, and it was a bitter sound. "The truth is that I came here to kill an innocent man for gold. The truth is that I have spent years murdering people without questioning whether they deserve to die. The truth is that Gideon saved my life when he should have let me die, and that kindness was not manipulation. It was genuine, and it made me realize that I have been on the wrong side of this conflict all along. Last chance, Kerra, step aside." "No." The fight was brutal and fast. Kerra was still weakened from her injury, her left arm almost useless, but she had been training for this since she was a child. She moved on instinct, her knife flashing as she parried the first attack and countered with a strike toward Drask's throat. He dodged, faster than she expected, and his blade scored a line across her ribs. Behind her, Gideon was fighting too, which surprised her. He had said he gave up the sword, but he moved with the trained efficiency of a veteran soldier, using a heavy iron poker from the fireplace to block and strike. One of the assassins went down hard when Gideon cracked him across the skull, and the sound of bone breaking echoed through the cottage. But they were outnumbered, and Drask was one of the council's best. He drove Kerra back step by step, his attacks relentless, and she could feel her strength failing. Her shoulder was bleeding again, the stitches torn open by her desperate movements, and pain was making her vision blur. Then Gideon was there, stepping in front of her, taking a knife strike meant for her chest. The blade sank into his side, and he grunted in pain but did not fall. Instead, he brought the poker down on Drask's wrist with devastating force, shattering bone, sending the knife clattering to the floor. Drask howled and stumbled back, clutching his ruined wrist. The other assassin, seeing their leader injured and their companion unconscious, made a tactical decision and fled into the night. Drask followed a moment later, shooting Kerra a look of pure hatred before disappearing into the darkness. The cottage fell silent except for their ragged breathing. Kerra turned to Gideon and saw blood spreading across his shirt, dark and wet. "You fool," she said, her voice breaking. "You should have let me take that hit. I am already wounded." "You did not have to." "Yes, I did," he interrupted, swaying slightly on his feet. "You were protecting me. It was only fair that I return the favor." Then his legs gave out, and she barely caught him before he fell. She lowered him carefully to the floor, her hands shaking as she examined the wound. The knife had gone deep into his side, missing vital organs by inches but still bleeding profusely. She needed to stop the bleeding, needed to get him to the table where his supplies were within reach, but he was too heavy for her to lift in her current state. "Tell me what to do," she said, fighting down the panic rising in her chest. "Gideon, I need you to tell me how to save you." He was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes focused on her face. "Blue bottle," he managed. "On the shelf. Yarrow and golden seal. Pack the wound." She moved as fast as she could, grabbing the bottle and finding clean cloth for bandages. Her own injuries screamed in protest, but she ignored them, focusing entirely on keeping Gideon alive. She packed the wound the way she had watched him do for her, pressing hard to slow the bleeding, wrapping bandages tight around his torso. "Good," he whispered. "You are doing good." Now the brown jar, 3 drops in water. For the pain. She administered the medicine, then sat beside him on the floor, keeping pressure on the wound with one hand while the other found his. "You are not allowed to die," she told him fiercely. "Do you hear me, Gideon Shaw? You saved my life, and I will not let you die now. I forbid it." He managed a weak smile. "Forbid it, I like that. Very authoritative. I am serious. I know you are." His fingers tightened around hers. "I am going to be fine, Kerra. I have survived worse than this, but you need to leave. Drask will come back with reinforcements. You cannot be here when they arrive. I am not leaving you." "Kerra, no." She leaned down, pressing her forehead against his. "I am not leaving you. I spent years running away from things that mattered, from connections that could have made me more than just a killer. I am not running anymore. We survive this together, or we do not survive it at all." He was quiet for a moment, his breath warm against her skin. "Together then," he agreed softly. She sat with him through the night, changing his bandages when they became soaked with blood, forcing more medicine down his throat when the pain made him gasp and tense. His fever spiked in the early morning hours, and she bathed his face and neck with cool water, whispering reassurances she did not entirely believe herself. But as dawn broke, his fever began to break as well, and the bleeding slowed to a manageable seep. He fell into a more natural sleep, his breathing evening out, and she finally allowed herself to believe that he would survive. She must have dozed off because she woke to find him watching her, his hand still clasped in hers. "You stayed," he said, sounding surprised. "I told you I would." "Yes, but I thought you might come to your senses while I was unconscious." She laughed, the sound tired but genuine. "My senses are what told me to stay. For the first time in my life, I listened to my heart instead of my training, and my heart said that losing you would be the worst mistake I could make." Gideon's expression softened, and he lifted his free hand to touch her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. "I am glad you stayed. I am glad you are here." They remained like that for a while, hands entwined, foreheads nearly touching, and Kerra felt something settle in her chest that she had never felt before. Peace, maybe, or hope. Or the beginning of something she did not have a name for yet, but desperately wanted to protect. Over the following days, they healed together. Kerra's shoulder improved steadily, the wound closing cleanly despite the torn stitches, and Gideon's side mended with the same care he had shown countless others. They moved around the cottage in a careful dance, helping each other with tasks that were too difficult to manage alone, sharing meals and medicine and quiet conversation. "We cannot stay here," Kerra said one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset. "Drask will report back to the council and they will send more assassins, better ones. They cannot afford to let either of us live now." "I know," Gideon said. "I have been thinking about that. There are settlements further north, in the borderlands where orc and human communities sometimes trade peacefully. It is not perfect, but it is better than most places. We could go there, start over. You would leave your cottage, your grandmother's home." He looked at the small building, his expression wistful. "I love this place. I have so many memories here, so much of my grandmother's wisdom woven into every corner, but it is just a building. Home is not a location, Kerra. It is the people we choose to be with, the connections we forge, the meaning we create in our lives. And I choose to be with you, wherever that takes us." Her throat tightened with emotion, and she had to look away to keep from crying. "I am an assassin," she reminded him. "I have killed dozens of people. I am not good or kind or worthy of the faith you seem to have in me." "You are all of those things and more," Gideon said firmly. "You made mistakes, yes. You followed orders you should have questioned. But when it mattered most, when you had to choose between your old life and something better, You chose better. That is what defines you, Kerra, not your past actions but your current choices. She turned back to face him, searching his eyes for any hint of doubt or deception, but she found only sincerity. "What are we doing, Gideon? What is this between us?" he smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "I think we are falling in love. Or maybe we have already fallen, and we are just now admitting it to ourselves." Love. The word hung between them, heavy with possibility and terror. Kerra had never been in love, had never allowed herself to be vulnerable enough for such feelings. But sitting here with this gentle human healer who had saved her life and stolen her heart, she could not deny the truth of what he was saying. "I love you," she said, testing the words, finding them both strange and right. "I do not know when it happened or how, but I love you, Gideon Shaw. And that terrifies me more than any battle I have ever fought." He laughed, pulling her closer until she was tucked against his uninjured side, her head resting on his shoulder. "It terrifies me too, but I have learned that the best things in life are usually the ones that scare us most. So let us be terrified together, and let us build something beautiful out of that fear." They left the cottage a week later, taking only what they could carry in packs on their backs. Gideon left his door unlocked, and a note inside explaining that any healer who found the place was welcome to use the supplies and tools he could not take with him. He hoped someone would continue the work he had started, offering shelter and medicine to those who needed it most. The journey north was slow and careful, both of them still healing, both of them watching for signs of pursuit. They avoided main roads and settlements, traveling through forests and over hills, camping under stars that seemed impossibly bright in the clear autumn air. Kerra taught Gideon some of the old orc songs her mother had sung to her as a child, and he taught her the names of every plant and herb they passed, explaining their medicinal properties with the enthusiasm of someone who truly loved his craft. They talked about their hopes for the future, about the kind of life they wanted to build together, about the children they might have someday, and whether those children would have tusks like their mother or smooth skin like their father. "They will be beautiful either way," Gideon said one night as they huddled close to their campfire for warmth, "because they will be ours." 3 weeks into their journey, they encountered a small trading post at the intersection of 2 rivers. The place was a chaotic mix of humans and orcs, dwarves and elves, all doing business with the wary respect of people who had learned that cooperation was more profitable than conflict. The proprietor, a grizzled orc woman named Marva, took one look at them and seemed to understand their story without needing to be told. "Running from something?" she asked bluntly. "More like running towards something," Gideon replied. "We heard there are mixed settlements further north. Places where we might be able to live in peace." Marva nodded slowly. "There are such places. Hard to find, harder to get accepted into, but they exist. You two are together then? Human and orc?" "Yes," Kerra said, lifting her chin defiantly, ready for judgment or disgust. But Marva just grinned, her tusks gleaming in the firelight. "Good for you. World needs more people willing to cross those lines, show the rest of us fools that we are all just people trying to survive. You will find what you are looking for about 2 weeks north of here, settlement called Harmony Ridge. Tell them Marva sent you. That should get you through the door at least." She provided them with supplies and directions, refusing payment despite their protests. "Consider it an investment in a better future," she said. "You two make it work up there. Maybe others will follow. Maybe someday we will not need special settlements for mixed couples. Maybe it will just be normal." Harmony Ridge was everything they had hoped for and nothing like they expected. The settlement sat in a high valley surrounded by protective mountains. a cluster of perhaps 200 people living in sturdy homes built with both orc and human architectural styles. Fields stretched out in careful rows, orchards heavy with late-season fruit, and workshops where craftspeople of various races worked side by side. The council that governed the settlement interviewed them extensively, asking about their skills, their histories, their commitment to the principles of mutual respect and cooperation that Harmony Ridge was founded on. Kerra was honest about her past as an assassin, watching the council members' faces carefully for signs of rejection. But the head counselor, a human woman named Iris, simply nodded. "We all come here running from something," Iris said. "What matters is what you do once you arrive. Can you commit to building instead of destroying? Can you contribute to this community in meaningful ways?" "Yes," Kerra said without hesitation. "I want to be more than what I was. I want to help people instead of hurting them." Gideon spoke up then, describing his skills as a healer, offering to establish a clinic to serve the settlement. The council's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. They had a healer who traveled between several settlements, but no one who lived in Harmony Ridge full-time, and they desperately needed someone with Gideon's expertise. They were accepted into the community on a provisional basis, given a small cottage near the edge of the settlement, and a plot of land for growing medicinal herbs. The first few months were challenging as they worked to prove themselves, to earn the trust of their neighbors, to build a life from nothing. Kerra discovered she had a talent for growing things, her strong hands gentle when tending delicate seedlings, and she took over managing the herb garden while Gideon set up his clinic. She also began training some of the younger members of the settlement in self-defense, teaching them how to protect themselves without teaching them to become killers. Gideon's clinic quickly became the heart of the community. He treated everyone who came through his door with the same compassionate care, whether they were suffering from a minor cold or a serious injury. Word of his skills spread, and soon people from other settlements were making the journey to Harmony Ridge specifically to see the healer who could work miracles. But the work Gideon was most proud of was the nights he spent teaching others his craft. He took on apprentices, young people of various races who wanted to learn the healing arts, and he passed on everything his grandmother had taught him. Kerra would often find him in the clinic late at night, bent over ancient medical texts with his students, his face alight with the joy of sharing knowledge. They married in the spring, a ceremony that blended orc and human traditions in ways that felt true to both of them. Kerra wore a dress of deep green that matched her skin, woven with silver thread that caught the light, and Gideon wore formal clothes in earth tones that complemented her perfectly. The entire settlement attended, along with visitors from neighboring communities, and the celebration lasted 3 days. On their wedding night, alone in their cottage with flower petals still scattered across the floor, Gideon pulled Kerra close and whispered against her hair. "I never thought I would have this. A home, a partner, a community that accepts me for who I am. You gave me all of that." "We gave it to each other," she corrected, tilting her head up to kiss him. "I was lost before I found you. I did not even know I was lost until you showed me what it felt like to be found." Their first child, a daughter, was born on a cold winter morning when snow blanketed the valley in pristine white. She had Kerra's green skin and pointed ears, Gideon's gray eyes and gentle smile, and tiny tusks that made them both laugh with delight. They named her Alara, after Gideon's grandmother, and from the moment she entered the world, she was loved fiercely by everyone in Harmony Ridge. 2 years later, a son followed, and then another daughter after that. Each child was a unique blend of their parents, beautiful and strong and raised with the absolute certainty that they belonged to both worlds, that they were not lesser for being mixed but greater for containing multitudes. Kerra never forgot her past. The lives she had taken haunted her sometimes, appearing in nightmares that left her gasping and shaken. But Gideon was always there in those dark moments, holding her close, reminding her that she had chosen a different path, that every life she saved now was a step toward balancing the scales. She also never forgot Drask and the Shadow Council. For years, she remained vigilant, always watching for signs of assassins, always ready to defend her family. But the expected attack never came. Eventually, through the networks of travelers and traders that passed through Harmony Ridge, she learned that the Shadow Council had collapsed from internal power struggles, its members scattered or dead. Drask himself had been killed in a dispute with another assassin, and the organization that had once seemed so powerful and inevitable had crumbled into irrelevance. The news brought her a complicated mixture of relief and sadness. She had escaped that life, but so many others had not. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Gideon surprised her with a gift. He led her to a newly constructed building on the outskirts of Harmony Ridge, larger than any structure in the settlement except the communal hall. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "A sanctuary," he said, opening the doors to reveal a space designed as both a clinic and a shelter. For refugees, for people fleeing violence and persecution, for anyone who needs a safe place to heal. "I know how much you worry about the others out there, the ones who are still suffering the way you once suffered. I thought we could do something about that together." Kerra walked through the space, taking in the rows of beds, the well-stocked medicine cabinets, the kitchens designed to feed dozens of people at once. It was everything she had dreamed of but never dared to speak aloud. "The council approved this?" she asked. "Unanimously." Harmony Ridge was founded to be a sanctuary for people like us. Expanding that mission, offering help to more people, feels like the natural next step. He came to stand beside her, taking her hand. "What do you think?" She thought about the scared girl she had been, hiding while her mother died, alone and angry and convinced that violence was the only language the world understood. She thought about the assassin she had become, efficient and deadly and empty inside. And she thought about the woman she was now, a wife and mother and healer in her own right, someone who had learned that the greatest strength was not in taking life but in protecting it. "I think it is perfect," she said, turning to wrap her arms around him. "I think it is exactly what the world needs, what I need." The sanctuary opened a month later, and refugees began arriving almost immediately. Orcs fleeing human persecution, humans escaping orc clan violence, mixed families with nowhere else to turn. They all found their way to Harmony Ridge and the shelter that Kerra and Gideon had built. Kerra worked alongside her husband, using her knowledge of both human and orc cultures to help refugees navigate the complicated process of starting over. She taught self-defense classes to those who wanted to learn, not to make them into warriors, but to give them confidence and the ability to protect themselves. She shared her story openly, letting people see that even someone with blood on their hands could find redemption and peace. Years passed, and Harmony Ridge grew into a thriving town, its population swelling with refugees who chose to stay and contribute to the community that had saved them. Other settlements began to form in the region, inspired by Harmony Ridge's example, creating a network of places where humans and orcs could live together in relative peace. Kerra's children grew into remarkable adults. Elara became a healer like her father, but she also had her mother's warrior spirit, and she traveled to distant settlements to establish clinics and teach people how to defend themselves without resorting to hatred and violence. Their son became a farmer and engineer, developing new agricultural techniques that improved crop yields across the region. Their youngest daughter became a teacher, educating children of all races about the importance of understanding and respecting differences. On a warm summer evening, when Kerra was in her middle years and her hair had begun to show streaks of silver, she sat on the porch of her cottage watching the sun set over the valley. Gideon emerged from the house, moving a bit slower than he used to but still healthy and strong, and settled into the chair beside her. "You ever regret it?" she asked, not for the first time. "Saving me that day, giving up your quiet life to build all of this?" He took her hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the decades. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Kerra. You and our children and this community we built together. If I could go back to that day and choose differently, knowing everything that would follow, I would make the exact same choice. I would catch you when you fell, and I would bandage your wounds, and I would fall in love with you all over again." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "I was sent to kill you," she murmured. "Instead, you saved me. Not just my life, but my soul. You gave me a reason to be more than a weapon." "We saved each other," Gideon corrected gently. "I was lonely and purposeless, healing people but not really connecting with anyone. You gave me a reason to fight for something bigger than myself. You gave me a family, a future, a reason to believe that one person's choices really can change the world." They sat in comfortable silence, as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple, stars beginning to emerge one by one. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their grandchildren playing, the next generation of their legacy, children who would grow up never knowing the depth of hatred and division that had once defined the relationship between humans and orcs. Kerra thought about the arrow she had fired so many years ago, the shot that missed its mark and changed everything. She had been the best assassin the Shadow Council had ever trained, and her only failure had become her greatest success. She had been sent to kill the lonely healer, but the orc warrior inside her had recognized something precious in Gideon Shaw, something worth protecting even at the cost of everything she had known. And in the end, his gentle hands had done what no weapon ever could. They had bandaged not just her physical wounds but the deeper injuries to her spirit, the scars left by years of violence and loneliness. He had shown her that there was another way to be strong, that mercy could be more powerful than any blade, that love could bridge divides that seemed unbridgeable. Their story had become legend in the region, told and retold until it took on mythical proportions. The assassin who became a healer. The healer who saved his would-be killer. The impossible love that founded a sanctuary. But sitting here with Gideon's hand in hers, watching the stars emerge over the home they had built together, Kerra knew that the reality was better than any legend. It was messy and complicated and sometimes hard. There were still people who hated them for what they represented, still dangers that threatened their community, still nights when old nightmares woke her gasping and afraid. But they faced all of it together, and that made all the difference. "I love you," she said into the growing darkness, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Gideon replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Always have, always will." And there, in the peace of the evening, surrounded by the community they had built and the family they had created, Kerra finally allowed herself to believe that she had found her place in the world. Not as an assassin or a warrior or a weapon, but as a woman who had learned that the greatest courage was not in taking life, but in choosing to build it, nurture it, and protect it with everything she had. The arrow had missed its mark that day in the forest, and in missing, it had found the only target that truly mattered. Not a heart stopped, but a heart awakened. Not a life ended, but two lives transformed and joined in ways neither could have imagined. Years later, when Kerra was old and her children had children of their own, when the sanctuary she and Gideon had founded had grown into a network of safe places across the entire region, someone asked her what advice she would give to young people struggling to find their purpose. She thought for a long moment before answering. "I would tell them that who you have been does not have to define who you become. I would tell them that one moment of mercy, one choice to be better than what the world expects, can change everything. I would tell them to look for the people who see value in you, even when you cannot see it in yourself, and to hold onto those people with everything you have." She paused, remembering a summer day long ago when she had fired an arrow meant to kill and instead found the love of her life. "And I would tell them that sometimes the shot you miss is the most important one you will ever take, because in that failure, in that moment of imperfection, you might discover something far more precious than success. You might discover grace." Gideon passed away peacefully in his sleep when he was 73, surrounded by family. His work continued by the many healers he had trained over the decades. Kerra grieved deeply, but without bitterness, knowing that they had been granted far more years together than either of them had any right to expect. She continued their work, running the sanctuary and teaching new generations until her own strength began to fail. On the day she died, 5 years after Gideon, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered around her bed. The room was full of love and tears, and Kerra looked at all of them with fierce pride. "Do not mourn too much," she told them, her voice weak but steady. "I have lived a remarkable life, far better than I deserved. I found love where I expected only death. I built hope where I had sown fear. I have been forgiven for things I never thought could be forgiven, and I have learned that redemption is always possible if we are brave enough to reach for it." She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her years but also the lightness of a life well lived. Her last thoughts were of Gideon, of the moment he had caught her when she fell, of the gentle way he had bandaged her wounds and told her that every life had value. In the end, the assassin and the healer had both found what they were looking for, not through violence or isolation but through the simple, radical act of choosing love over fear, mercy over vengeance, connection over division. Their legacy lived on in the sanctuary they had built, in the children they had raised, in the hundreds of lives they had touched and transformed. And somewhere beyond the veil of death, Kerra hoped, Gideon was waiting for her with that gentle smile and those kind gray eyes, ready to take her hand once more and walk with her into whatever came next. Together, as they had always been. Together, as they would always be. The story of how an orc warrior was sent to kill a lonely healer, how he bandaged her wounds instead of fighting her, how that single act of mercy changed both their lives and rippled out to change an entire region, became a tale told for generations. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, even when hatred seems overwhelming, love can find a way. That one person choosing compassion over cruelty can shift the course of history. And in Harmony Ridge, where it all began, they built a monument. Not to war or conquest or any of the things that cultures usually commemorate, but to a moment of healing. A simple stone marker that read, "Here mercy triumphed. Here love prevailed. Here two souls found each other and showed us all that there is always another choice."